Hi, this is Paul Chang. So you wake up, look up at your ceiling, and there it is, that ugly, spreading brown water stain. Your stomach just drops. You immediately think, well, you probably assume you're about to be out 12, maybe 15 grand for a whole new roof. Actually, wait. Before you panic and let a commissioned roofing salesman scare you into a total tear-off over imminent structural failure, you need to see this thick, incredibly messy, honestly incredibly toxic smelling black sludge is commercial-grade fibered asphalt, a wet patch. It costs practically nothing. We're talking maybe $2 worth of material for a single repair. But the residential roofing industry, which by the way is a $50 billion machine operating on massive labor markups, absolutely hates that you can just walk into a hardware store and buy this. They want you to believe a single lifted flashing means your entire system is compromised. It isn't. If you want to stop getting ripped off by the home improvement industry, hit subscribe right now, because I'm going to show you exactly how this weird, tar-like peanut butter physically shoves water out of the way to fix your leak forever, even if it's literally pouring rain outside right now. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's back up for a second. When you call a roofing company, actually, let me rephrase that. Some local independent guys will absolutely come out, climb up there, and just fix your leak for a couple $100. They exist. But the massive roofing conglomerates, you know the ones, the guys with the custom-wrapped trucks and the aggressive radio ads running every morning, you have to understand a fundamental truth about their business model. They do not make their money patching your roof. They operate almost entirely on high-ticket, high-margin replacements.
Think about the math from their side for a minute. Dispatching a crew, setting up the heavy extension ladders, dragging out the OSHA safety harnesses, all for a $200 patch job? It's a massive opportunity cost for them. They would much rather send that exact same crew 3 blocks over to do a $12,000 tear-off. In a standard residential quote, the labor and the corporate overhead are eating up roughly 60 to 70% of that final bill. You are paying thousands for manpower, not actual shingles. And here's where the psychology of it really comes in. It's brilliant, honestly. A salesman walks into your living room, right? He's holding an iPad showing you a zoomed-in, high-def photo of a slightly lifted flashing near your chimney. He starts talking about the water damage cascade. That is a real industry term, by the way. He looks you dead in the eye and tells you that this minor leak is going directly into your attic, which is going to lead to black mold inside your walls, which rots the roof trusses, which collapses the drywall onto your kitchen table. Suddenly, dropping 15 grand feels like you're saving your family from a catastrophe, not getting ripped off. But here's the absolute truth that the algorithmically boosted SEO articles don't want you to know. A vast majority of localized leaks are exactly that, localized. It's one failed seal. It's one shifted shingle that the wind caught. You do not need a new roof. You need a permanent gasket. Enter this stuff. Commercial-grade fibered asphalt cement. Some guys call it wet patch, others just call it roofing tar, though honestly calling it tar is doing it a massive disservice. It's heavily engineered. It's packed with cross-linking polymers and these tiny rigid reinforcing fibers mixed right into the sludge. When you pop the lid on a gallon of this stuff, the first thing that hits you is the smell. It is aggressive. It punches you in the face with this heavy, harsh petroleum and solvent vapor. It smells toxic because, well, it's industrial grade. This isn't the cheap, flimsy, white acrylic caulk you buy for $3 to seal your bathroom baseboards. That stuff dries out, gets brittle, and snaps the second the weather turns cold.
Your roof is a brutal, violent environment. In the middle of August, those dark asphalt shingles are baking at 150, 160 degrees? They expand, they physically stretch. Then in February, they freeze solid and contract violently. Traditional rigid fixes just crack under that extreme thermal stress. They literally tear themselves apart. But an elastomeric paste, it stretches, it recovers, it maintains a flexible, waterproof seal over a puncture indefinitely. Let me explain that better. It's not just sitting on top of the hole like a Band-Aid. The premium formulas contain specific chemical surfactants. What that means in plain English is that it physically displaces water at a molecular level. You could have a literal stream of water pouring through a crack during a thunderstorm, and if you take a trowel and push this sludge right into the gap, the chemical bonds push the standing water out of the way and adheres directly to the wet asphalt underneath. It's wild to watch. But, and this is a massive but that you need to hear before you go climbing up an aluminum ladder this weekend, this stuff is incredibly unforgiving to work with. It has the consistency of really thick, sticky peanut butter that's been mixed with wet road tar. If you get it on your jeans, those jeans are dead. They're going in the trash. If you get it on your bare hands, look, I've done it, and it's a nightmare. You will be scrubbing your knuckles with mineral spirits and a stiff wire brush for 3 days straight just to get the sticky black residue out of your skin. You have to be deliberate. You can't just squeeze it out of a cheap plastic caulking tube, smear it around with your thumb, and walk away feeling like a hero. You have to physically force it into the seams. So, if it's this effective, why haven't you heard of it? Why is every Google search telling you to call a professional immediately before you cause structural damage? It's not because the fix doesn't work. It's because of a very specific, deeply buried clause in your roof's warranty.
This is where things get genuinely infuriating. The major shingle manufacturers, the names you'd instantly recognize at the hardware store, they intentionally designed their multi-decade warranties with a trapdoor. If you, the homeowner, go up there and apply an unauthorized liquid patch to fix a leak yourself, they can void the entire warranty on a 20-year roof just for stopping a leak. They use the threat of a voided warranty to force you back into the hands of the licensed contractors who then tell you that you need a full replacement anyway. It is a perfectly closed loop designed to extract maximum cash from your bank account. But there is a way around this, a very specific loophole to apply this patch so that it completely solves the leak without giving the manufacturer a single excuse to rip up your warranty. It requires one specific tool and a completely different approach to how you prep the area before you apply the paste. If you screw this PEP step up, the paste won't bond, the leak will come right back, and you'll be totally out of options. But if you do it right, it completely bypasses their little strap. So here is exactly what I mean. So you're up on the roof. You found the spot. Most people, well, actually, before you even touch a tool, let me stop you right there because I've made this exact mistake myself. Finding the actual hole on the outside of your roof is way harder than it looks from the inside. Water travels. It hits a tiny tear in the flashing, rolls down the underlayment for 6 feet, hits a rafter, and then finally drops on your ceiling drywall. If you just climb up and patch directly above the water stain in your living room, you're probably patching perfectly good shingles. You have to go up into the attic first. Bring a stupidly bright flashlight. Follow the water trail up the wood until it stops. Drive a small nail up through the roof deck right there so that you can actually find the exact location when you climb up top. It sounds obvious, but you'd be amazed how many people skip this and then get furious when the ceiling still drips a week later.
Okay, so now you're up top. You found the nail, you see the crack and the sealant around a plumbing vent, or maybe a shingle tab that the wind bent back. The immediate instinct is to just scoop out a big glob of this black tar with a putty knife and slap it over the hole. Do not do that. That is exactly what gives the manufacturer's inspector the excuse to say, improper DIY application over unprepared surface, warranty voided. If you just smear it on top of oxidized, dirty asphalt, it's not going to bond. You're basically gluing it to dust. A month later, the summer sun bakes it, the wind catches the edge, and it peels right off in one big, useless chunk. This is where that specific prep step comes in. You need a stiff wire brush. Not a nylon scrub brush from the kitchen, I mean a heavy-duty, aggressive metal wire brush. You have to aggressively scrub the exact area you're going to patch. You want to physically scrape away the moss, the loose ceramic grit, and that top layer of chalky, oxidized asphalt. It feels terrible to do, honestly. You're sitting up there, scraping away at your own roof, listening to that harsh, scratching sound of metal bristles ripping into the shingle. It feels like you're damaging it. But what you're actually doing is exposing raw virgin asphalt underneath. That is what the polymers in the wet patch need to bite into to create that permanent chemical weld. Now, as for applying it, this is the critical part, and it's why using a cheap $2 plastic caulking gun from the bargain bin is a massive mistake. If you buy this stuff in the tubes instead of the gallon bucket, which I actually recommend for most small leaks because it's way easier to control, it is incredibly dense. Remember, it's like thick, tarry peanut butter. A cheap caulking gun will literally bend in half in your hands when you try to squeeze the trigger. The plastic handles flex, the metal rod slips, and absolutely nothing comes out. I've thrown away so many cheap guns out of pure frustration.
You need a heavy-duty caulking gun with a high thrust ratio, like a 12-to-1 or an 18-to-1 ratio. What that means is for every pound of pressure you put on the trigger, the gun puts 18 pounds of pressure on the plunger. It forces that thick, heavy sludge out in a smooth, consistent bead without breaking your hand. I put a link in the description below to the exact heavy-duty gun I use, along with the specific chemical-resistant nitrile gloves you absolutely need to wear. Seriously, do not skip the gloves. Once you push it into the crack, you need a margin trowel to feather the edges. You don't want a bulky lump sitting on your roof. Rainwater will hit that lump, pull up behind it, and eventually find a new way into your house. You have to smooth the edges out so they taper down to absolutely nothing. You want the rain to flow over the patch like a seamless ramp. If you do exactly this, wire brush, heavy-duty thrust gun, and feather the edges, you have created a permanent, chemically bonded repair. A warranty inspector can't even argue with it because it functions as an integrated, localized seal rather than a messy DIY modification. And you really need to listen to this next part. None of that prep work matters if you buy the wrong brand of paste. There are two very specific types of wet patch sold at the hardware store. They sit right next to each other on the shelf. The buckets look almost identical, but if you buy the wrong one and apply it to an asphalt shingle on a hot day, the solvents in it will literally melt the surrounding shingles and cause a massive, gaping hole in your roof. Let me show you exactly which one to avoid and the only two brands you should ever trust on your house.
See, sitting on that bottom shelf, usually covered in dust, you'll find standard plastic roof cement. It's cheap, maybe $1 less a tube, but it is loaded with incredibly harsh, volatile solvents. If you slather that onto a modern fiberglass asphalt shingle, the chemicals aggressively react. I actually made this exact mistake on my own detached garage a few years back. The old shingle literally curled up, got soft and squishy like warm chewing gum, and completely disintegrated around the edges. It turned a tiny drip into a massive leak. You absolutely have to check the label for elastomeric or wet patch, specifically formulated for wet surface application. Personally, I only use Henry 208R wet patch or a premium clear copolymer like Through the Roof. With these, you aren't melting your roof, you're reinforcing it. When you drag your metal trowel across a bead of that Henry 208R, you can actually physically see the tiny hair-like reinforcing fibers stretching out in the thick black sludge. That's the structural web that holds the seal together when your roof expands in the July sun. Look, I've put direct links in the description below to the heavy-duty thrust caulking gun, the margin trowel, and the specific elastomeric paste that actually work. Don't guess at the hardware store. Just grab the right materials. You don't need to hand over $15,000 to a commissioned salesman just because water found the tiny pinhole. Get the wire brush, do the prep, and seal the gap yourself. If this saved you a massive headache, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.